Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm going to convene the now 9th meeting of the Civilian Police Review Board. The first order of business, and we do have a quorum, would be the approval of the minutes from the previous meeting. Those minutes would have been emailed to you. Can I have a motion for approval?
Move second.
I'm not sure if moved by Pastor Nathan and seconded by Mark Fluharty. Any questions or concerns about the minutes? Then all in favor of approving, please raise your hand. Minutes are approved. So you will see on our agenda today that our very first item of business is that we're going to have a status report from our Inspector General Jacqueline Hendricks. What might surprise you on the agenda, because this really just came up either late last week or even yesterday, is that I had a meeting with representatives from the Department of Justice yesterday, and they will be on the agenda today and presenting. It was just fortuitous that we were meeting on today and that they were in town, and so they wanted to be on the agenda so they could give you an update of the work that they are doing here in the city of Columbus. But first, I will turn the meeting over to Inspector General Hendricks.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to say, well, it's good evening, Madam Chair, Honorable Board, and it is so exciting to be here. I enjoy meeting each and every one of you, and I appreciate so much the feedback that I got. So just wanted to definitely say that. And I look forward to being able to talk to you more with the different committees that you're involved in, because I know I'll probably be a part of answering some of the questions, and then you'll be a part of giving me some feedback. So with that, we'll start with the presentation. So just starting off with the update, what I want to do is I'm going to introduce to you the Deputy Inspector General in the office. Going to give you department updates, department goals of what some of the goals are for April and May, and if you have any questions. And the goals are not complete of what we're going to be doing, because also, again, I'm going to be working with some of the committees, and so we've already talked about some of the different things that you're going to expect from me, and different, I want to say, me sitting in on some of the different committee meetings that you're going to have. So that's just not included in this. So the Deputy Inspector General that I asked to be a part of our team, who I thought was somebody that had, you can click that just has great experience, and I'm going to let him speak briefly, is Richard Blunt. Some of you probably know who he is. What I can tell you is the first 30 days of me coming aboard and being in Michigan, there's a lot of things I was asking for him to do and have in place by the time I came into this office. And so once I did come into the office and I started work with him the next 30 days, I started realizing the extensive experience and knowledge that he had in this role. And so I did ask him if he was interested in coming aboard, and he, blessed me, and I would say blessed the city with deciding to become a part of this team. And so I'm going to give him a chance to kind of give you a little overview about who he is and his skills.
Before you speak, let me say that I commended the Inspector General on her first hiring decision. I am fully aware of Richard's extensive investigatory experience and, of course, his time with the city. And so from my perspective, you hit it out of the ballpark the first time up at bat. Richard?
Thank you, Chair Jackson. Good afternoon, board members. She said I'm Richard Blunt. I first of all want to let you know I am a native of Columbus, Ohio. I attended elementary and middle school at St. Thomas the Apostle, which is no longer around, but and I attended high school from Bishop Hartley, or at Bishop Hartley, I should say. After high school, I joined the military, ended up serving 20 years and retiring from the United States Navy. I have presented you with my resume. too long to, I don't want to take up all the time, but I just want to say I am elated and honored to serve and be asked to serve as the Deputy Inspector General. It is a passion of mine, and I'm just honored to be a part of this historic endeavor. I think a review of my resume will reveal to you that I have over 30 years of investigative and leadership experience, to include 20 years of honorable military service. So again, thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to the challenge.
Thank you again. Okay. So let's go on with the department update. So with the engagement plan, just letting you know, I'm still continuing on with the engagement plan for my first 30 days. I've had a chance to meet with several people within the city government, being the mayor, city council, city auditor, deputy director of public safety, chief of police. I'm not going to go over everybody, but just some of the important people would be city attorneys, and definitely, I want to say the Civilian Review Board members. I really, really enjoyed that, and I hope that you had a good chance to get to know me and ask questions and continue having that relationship. Next, when we talk about the office location, so we have identified the office location at being 50 West Town Street, that's Suite 100. Those of you that had a chance to visit me had a chance to kind of come through, and I did a walkthrough of the office. There are still some renovations that we're expecting to occur before we open up. It's a little bit of a backlog on that, simply because there's some city contracts and things that have to go out to bid. So we're still working on those. I know we're pushing for the opening date of July the 11th. Not sure how that's going to look right now, but I can tell you we and some of the board members are really pushing for that. And so with that saying, we have identified a temporary location, just in case we're not able to be in that location during the renovation. The temporary location is still in the same building, but it's just another adjoining suite. I didn't really want to switch locations, and the main reason why is because I felt it was important just to stay in that location, especially if citizens are starting to come and fill out complaints, or we are starting to interview people. I didn't really want to have them going from one location to another. So that's kind of where I think we're going to be right now. As far as the staff, what I want to tell you is we did a job posting for the investigator for 30 days. Our first posting we did was on March the 4th. The posting ended on April the 4th. I did 30 days for investigator just to make sure that we had a great pool of candidates to select from, and we have. So we did a 14-day posting for our executive secretary. That posting went out on April the 15th. And it ended on, it went out on March 15th, and it ended on March 29th. And again, we had a really good pool. And we were working with HR, so HR had a chance to kind of get those applications, vet them, submit to the people to our office who had the minimum qualifications. And so from there, we've selected the candidates that we are going to be interviewing. We still do have, I want to say, one more batch that we've aggressively been interviewing, aggressively been reviewing, to select the people. So what I will say is I am happy to say that we will start interviewing people for the position of investigator and executive secretary in April. Matter of fact, Thursday and Friday of this week, we will start doing virtual interviews for some of the people for investigator. And HR has already sent that out. So it's an aggressive schedule, but I think it's needed to make sure that the office is staffed. We get the people in there, and then we can move on with the next step that we need to. Click. So continuing on with the updates, one of the things we looked at was our case management software. So we know that the law department uses Matrix. So what we felt was probably a good ideal is to see what the city already had, what kind of case management system the city already have, because it might be easier for us to kind of piggyback on that if that works for our office. Also, just to see what the license and everything looked like, we worked with IT department to make sure that it's compatible with the system that IT has, along with the laptops and everything that we're going to be getting. So we have done one demo. We did like what we saw. We're still working with IT to do another demonstration for us, just to make sure that it's going to have all the features we're looking for. What I will tell you what the case management software should be doing is it's going to generate numbers for the complaints. So they're unique identified numbers for the complaints as the complaints are coming in. It's also going to be the data system that will house all of our documents, reports, and things like that. It's important because when we start looking for patterns, we can use this report based on the information we put in to be able to do reports, to research information, and that's going to help us being able to be accountable for all of the information and stuff that we're going to be looking for. That's going to be helping us as investigators to be able to do the reports we need, look at things, and recall all of that information. So that's kind of what we're looking at for as far as the matrix systems. Training. So with training, what I would like to announce to you is that I did in March attend training with the Association of Inspector Generals. So what the Association of Inspector General is, it's a national organization that sets standards for OIG offices across the United States. And they actually set standards for other IGs that are outside of the United States. It's a national organization. And so I went to that training, and with the training you get just, it's extensive information. It allows you to also network with other Inspector General offices, and they come together, they talk about policy procedures, they also talk about best practices, and they also talk about different problems that they have experienced in their own offices. So it's a great networking. Also with the training, not only do you take the training, but at the end of the training you have to take a test, and you have to pass that test to be certified. And so I did pass that test, and I am certified as an Inspector General with the association. Thank you. What I also wanted to talk about is training also with the National Association of Civilian Oversight for Law Enforcement. So with the review board, it's important also, I believe, for the board members to get some of the same type of training and be able to network with others that are doing exactly the same thing that the board is doing. So this is something I just wanted the board to be aware of. There is a conference that will be coming up. That conference will be coming up in September the 11th of 2020. It's going to be at Fort Worth, Texas. I did have a chance to speak with our finance department to make sure that in our budget that we're going to be able to fund training for the review board if anyone here wants to attend that training. And I'm sure you have a committee that's going to handle whatever training that your board will be meeting, so I'll be able to pass that information on. What I will tell you is just a little bit oversight of what NACO does. It is a nonprofit organization that brings together individuals and agencies working to establish or improve oversight of police officers in the United States. I can definitely give you that site if anybody wants to visit that site to get a little bit more information.
We'll handle that.
Okay. Click. So when I talk about the goals for April, my goals for April in this office really is making sure that we get a chance to interview our staff and bring the staff on and hire. One thing we want to do is when it comes to policies and procedures, that's working on the policies and procedures of how that's going to look for intaking complaints, how it's going to be reporting. Also, I'll be doing a standard operating procedure for our office, which is how I'm going to be training my staff. Also, the investigations and stuff that the staff would be doing will be in line with the Green Book. That's a national standard for National Association of Inspector Generals. It's national standard how investigations should be done. The other thing is the website. We had a chance to speak with IT about trying to establish our website. I think the website is going to be a really good thing for our office to be able to have. It should also, what I'm trying to talk with IT to make sure we're able to do that, is be able to put any information that we want to be out there for citizens to have. Also, I think it would actually be a good site for them to be able to log on, and if they want to file a complaint, give more information, put our mission statement out there. So we are looking to kind of get that together. And then when it talks about the community, our outreach program, again, we're working on trying to see how that looks and putting things together with that. Again, I know that we do have a committee here, so be working with that. I had a chance to meet with some of the different board members, and so I am definitely available as different events come up for us to kind of work together with that to be able to get the community to be aware of what our office is. We're also working with the graphics department with the city in order to produce flyers, posters, to be able to put that information out. And also, I think we have a meeting coming up with the media, again, to be able to figure out how that's going to look as far as doing more of an outreach program.
Our meeting tomorrow is with Deputy Chief of Staff, who's responsible for communications in the mayor's office, to help us just kind of think through all of that, since there isn't anyone currently on staff in the Inspector General's office that would be generating that type of material.
And click. And so one of the goals that I'm looking at for May is I feel that by May, we should have identified who some of our staff is, and that's meaning that our executive secretary, one of our executive secretary, and our investigators, and want to start getting them into training. And so some of the training and stuff that we've looked at that we feel is important for the staff is legal training, also them getting training on the collective bargaining agreement, ABCs of policing. I like the implicit bias training, also having them get training with CPD, do some ride-alongs. And this also will include any type of outreach programs that are going on. I like the staff to be involved in that too. My goal is for the citizens to be able to really see our office, see who the investigators are, see who the people are that's going to be servicing them, and I want them to feel comfortable with that. Are there any questions?
I will share with how many of the board members actually visited the office? So you actually went to the office. So you know it's a little tricky to find. And not only that, it's limited parking. And on that note, I visited twice, but the first time I came out to find a nice parking ticket at the meter. I did put money in the meter, but evidently I didn't put enough, and I want you to know it was promptly paid within 48 hours, even though I think I had 30 days. But it is going to be a little tricky, and I do think that in some of our messaging, we will need to say something about parking. I mean, so yes, there's parking. Most of it is metered parking, around there. I think the garage is a little bit further down, but we need to alert folks to that. But again, if they're coming down by bus, it's not too far off of High Street. So that's a positive in terms of the location. But it is a little tricky.
So thanks so much. Excited to see operations underway. It was great to meet with you, and also congratulations, Mr. Blunt. So wanted to ask a couple of questions in terms of the planning around. I know we've got kind of the hiring is underway, the interview process are underway, but in terms of over the coming months, if there are additional plans in terms of staffing up and what hiring might look like. I only bring that up because I think there haven't been a whole lot of opportunities, I think, in the general public outside of the first few meetings that we had to really get a sense of what the process is looking like. I think this is a great opportunity to get this update here. But I just want to get a sense of, over the next several months, are there other plans for hiring down the road so that somebody's listening into this meeting and they say, hey, I missed the initial job postings, but maybe this is something I want to do down the road? Is that a possibility?
What I will say is I know that there is one other position that we're looking at, and I think as our office grows and we find the need for more additional staff, that we will definitely be hiring more additional staff. I will say that I know that when it came to the process of hiring, one of the things that I worked with HR was to not just put it out there on the city website. We also put it out there on Indeed. I think we posted it on LinkedIn, and I'm trying to figure. There was one other site, I think that was a free site. I can't remember, I apologize. So we tried to put it out there for people, and we tried to put it out there long enough so people would have an opportunity to kind of, apply.
Yeah, that's great. That's helpful. I'm definitely in support of staffing up the Department of Inspector General's office, so hopefully we're able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
A position that we talked about yesterday, and we're going to continue to talk about it, and this was a recommendation from the folks I met with the DOJ. Because keep in mind, this particular group of individuals are working in various cities around, whether it's called the Office of Inspector General or something else, that there be, I'll say, a dedicated person, whether you say, community specialist, that role could maybe be in the marketing role also, but someone who's not an investigator. It is really the person's role to be out in the community on a very regular basis. Initially, certainly, I know that both the Inspector General and the Deputy Inspector General will be spending time there. We've talked about the area commissions, et cetera. But when the office is really up and rolling and working, they can't be there. And in most offices, you have someone, like that. And I think it's very important that we look at that role and do it fairly quickly.
I just had a quick question, and you may have touched on this. I was a few minutes late coming in, so my apologies for that. Could you elaborate? You said some of the positions are posted, and you've been conducting some interviews. And so would you just elaborate a little bit on some of the characteristic skills, qualifications that you are looking for some of these inspectors that you'll be hiring?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So, and I may have said interview, but what we've been doing is just reviewing the applications. And so, to me, it's very important that we have a very diverse group of investigators. So some of the positions that we've looked at, we've seen, we've seen some retired Ohio State troopers that were also instructors. We thought that was great. We've also seen some probation investigators that we've looked at. We've also seen some investigators that have a social background as far as social work. We've looked at that. We've also seen some investigators that are paralegal. We thought that was really great. We've also seen some investigators that were, you let me know because Richard has been reviewing them with me. Paralegal, who else have we seen?
Retired Columbus Division of Police.
Oh, Columbus Division of Police. We've seen some investigators that are military police that we've looked at. What other investigators? I know Family services, we've seen some investigators that have data analytics background, which I think is great to have someone with that type of background. Ohio Civil Rights Commission, yes. And we've seen some investigators from the city's law department. So I think it's a diverse group, which I think is really great, and that's one of the things that I think will make the office a success, is having all of that background. I would say much like yourselves in the roles that you present, because everybody brings something to the table. So that's some of the roles that we look at, and really excited about that.
Approximately how many investigative positions are you filling out of a pool of how many that you're planning to interview?
Okay, so in some of this, we were guided by what HR stated. So we will be filling 6 positions for investigators. We are looking for somebody that has a data analytics background along with a policy analysis. And then we are looking for somebody that has a little bit of auditing background. That also goes into play because when you're doing allegations of misconduct, you don't know whether they may involve anything that would involve maybe grants when you're looking at, I want to say, grant funding, whether you're looking at misconduct could be involving payroll. So I kind of like somebody with that background. But that's pretty much what we were looking at. Did I answer your question, or?
How many are you interviewing?
Oh, so how many people? Thank you. So we will be looking at the fact that we're interviewing, the positions for 6, we're looking to interview the top 18 candidates. And I can tell you right now, based on the fact of everyone that we looked at, we've got more than maybe 18 candidates we looked at that seem to be really good candidates that qualify for the position. So we're just looking to see if they're going to be a good fit for the office.
Thank you.
I was glad to hear that you're looking at a diverse group, and Mr. Blunt indicated Civil Rights Division, and I think it's probably very important to have, as investigators, not only military and law enforcement, and also maybe from civil rights and from criminal defense, so that when investigations are conducted, that there can be a variety of ideas and brought in too. So I think that's a very good idea.
Oh, thank you. And I also wanted to mention that we've actually have a couple of candidates that are from the Inspector General community that has also reached out and applied to be investigators in this office.
Are there any other questions?
Go ahead, Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much.
Great to have you both aboard, and Mr. Blunt as well for, you being hired, so great. I just wondered, I'm not clear about when the process is going to be developed for filing and how that goes. Have you mentioned that? What the plans are? Is it already done, or how is that? I didn't think so. So I was being generous. I'm apologetic. But when might that happen? That we'll work out the process for filing a civilian complaint?
Well, what I will tell you is that we do know that my office does have a procedure in place for how we're going to be handling the complaints once they are received in our office. But what we're working on right now is just the policies and procedures based on the charter of how that process is going to work between the board and my office. So that's.
So do you have a basic target date that by? I was thinking about it just because we want to get you guys out to the community, and, it's sort of a chicken and egg kind of thing. You want to be able to say to the community, hey, we exist, and here's how you do it. So, yeah, do you have a target?
Well, by statute, the office has to be up and running by July the 11th. I mean, that's that. The city council amended the statute, extended it to July the 11th. And of course, things are being developed until then. I am guessing that, I will not say, the May meeting, and I have to have a conversation about the May meeting, but at least by June, all of that will be laid out for you.
I was just going to add, I've talked with Inspector General Hendricks, so Gambit and Mark and I, we are on the Rules and Regulations Committee, which is part of the group that is supposed to be helping with coming up with all of those things. And so IG Hendricks and I have talked about what our group already started working on and gave her access to it so that she could see what we'd already started typing out. Because we ran into questions like, well, should there be a hotline? Is there a website that you can use to submit? What are the various ways that people should be able to reach the office? And we tried to kind of flesh out what those look like. And then IG Hendricks already is connected with NACOL standards that already have intake procedures. And so the hope is to blend together the ideas we've started with and what she's bringing to be able to present to the board, because the way the charter is written, the board has to approve whatever the process is.
And so we'll have plenty of time, though, to review those in order to give feedback. It would be better than having being presented at a meeting and saying, hey, will you approve that?
So this is going to be my suggestion for May, that we will move our May meeting, so not from the first Tuesday, to either the second or third Tuesday. And I'm just sticking with Tuesdays. We can do a dual poll because at least it works for this meeting, with the idea that you would be sent all of the information by what would typically be our May meeting date. And then within a week to 2 weeks, we would convene to discuss and to vote on them. Does that sound reasonable in time, both from the Inspector General and members of the board, and to you, Ms. Burns? Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, no, I think that sounds reasonable. I did have a question just in terms of kind of the bylaws and how they operate. So, you know, in one instance, it's the rules and regulations that would require approval, or a plan that would be presented and require some sort of approval by this board. But then my understanding is that the actual hiring processes that you all are going through is something that's entirely under the purview of the Department of Inspector General without any sort of
Yes.
engagement. Okay, great.
Yes.
Just wanted to confirm.
Yes. And I believe that in addition to the board approving certain policies and procedures, and I'm looking at Mr. Tobias, they also have to be submitted to City Council for approval. And so again, working on that timeframe. Okay? Yes?
Piggyback on Kyle's statement. Actually, thank you. Actually, that answered my question. That was the one that I had. What I was going to ask of you is there any way to somehow possibly way of showing us the board members, like some of your top candidates, or at the very least, when you are getting really close to that 6 that you've already picked, if we could have a sneak peek at some of your candidates that are actually lined up for that. And I'm not sure if it's possible or allowed or legalities, et cetera, but.
I want to be very sure that this board does not overreach into the office of the Inspector General. You know, certainly, I would hope that we may be the first individuals that she shares her decisions, but not being involved in the process along the way. Now, I'm just your chair, but that's how I feel about it. She said independence. We hired her with the idea that she can do this and will do it, even doubly so now with Mr. Blunt. So that's the way I would leave it. And again, you always have to be concerned when we're together about it being a public meeting and what then gets disseminated to the public before it's time. Anything else? Any other questions? Well, then, thank you for coming and presenting today. I'm very excited, that we're moving along.
Thank you so much. I sure appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm sorry, is there another, yes?
I really didn't have a question, but I wanted to share this. I really enjoyed my meeting with you. And one of the things that really just got me really excited, and I'm going to say this, was the fact that you are glad to be here. That lets me know that, and I personally believe that both you and Mr. Blunt are going to do an excellent job because you want to do it. It's more than a job. So I just wanted to make sure I interjected that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Thank you. And I will just share with you, and I won't call it chiding or overstepping, I've been a little bit concerned about the number of hours that our Inspector General is putting in. We actually had scheduled a dinner, and she shared with me, well, but I have a meeting at 7. I'm like, why are you having a meeting at 7? And I know the kind of hours that she's putting in. So rest assured, she is working really, really, really hard.
Do you need a pass?
Thank you so much. I definitely appreciate I appreciate all the warm words. I really do. And
All right.
as you know, my goal is just making sure that, not only the success, but that we're all success. And again, I appreciate the fact that I'm a part of your team. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking now, because I don't know if we're going to need some technical support as we, oh, no, that's me.
They got you. They get us at the top.
There
she is.
Oh, okay, there you go. So we're going to move into the part of our agenda where we have representation from the Department of Justice. So who is actually in the room who's going to move to the table? And I certainly know that you're not Jessica Drake that I met with yesterday. So would you please introduce yourself?
Certainly. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to address the board. My name is Sean Smoot. I'm a managing partner at 21CP Solutions. I'm a contractor for the United States Department of Justice, Office of Community-Oriented Policing, COPS office.
Oh, thank you. Should I start again?
Could I just remind members, don't touch the buttons. I think the mic's already on, so when you actually hit your button, you're turning yourself off. You should have a nice, little steady green light that stays on at all times, okay? Why don't you start again?
Okay, and I won't touch the button, although you might ask me to later. My name is Sean Smoot. I'm the managing partner at 21CP Solutions. My company has been contracted with the Department of Justice Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services, or COPS office, to provide some technical assistance and support to the Columbus Police Department. Our company was formed by myself, Charles Ramsey, and Roberto Villasenor when after we served on the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing under President Obama. We have 6 partners now and a pretty extensive group of folks. We actually have 4 people on the ground here today. And just in terms of my background, I'm an attorney by training, former law enforcement officer. I served as an elected alderman for 12 years. I served as a police commissioner for 10 years. And have dedicated my consulting career to furthering the concepts that we developed as part of the 21st Century Task Force. So I'm very pleased to be joined today by one of our community engagement associates, Ms. Ganesha Martin, who I will let introduce herself. I met Ganesha when we started. I'm on the monitoring team for the federal consent decree in Baltimore, Maryland, and I believe Ganesha was the chief of staff at the time that we met there, and we're very fortunate to, when she left that position, to be able to make her part of our team. Ganesha?
Good afternoon, everyone. Sean, give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Great, okay. So I apologize that I'm not there in person. I tried 3 times going to the airport, but that plane just did not want to get me there to Columbus. But I have enjoyed being able to meet with folks over the past couple of days via Zoom, including your chairwoman there, who I think has done a little bit of everything in the city. So I'll introduce myself, and then after Sean tells you a little bit more about our work, I'll just have a couple of other observations really quickly. So I'm a lawyer by education and training. As Sean mentioned, I was working in Baltimore for about a decade. I started out as the deputy mayor of public safety and emergency management under Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake. And then she brought in a police chief from California to specifically focus on the relationship between Black communities and the police. In Baltimore City, it was eviscerated, not broken, from decades of zero tolerance policing. So we worked on that, and then was asked to go over to be the chief of staff to the police commissioner to work really closely to move some of those initiatives forward. This was around 2015 where we started seeing shootings of unarmed Black men on the national news. And so I was asked to go up and work on legislation that actually would help with police reform. I worked with a lot of activists and told the commissioner that, you know, the community actually really hates the police at this point. And I asked to create the Bureau of Community Engagement, which I was allowed to do. And then the very next day, Freddie Gray died. So we were in the midst of the uprising and the riots in Baltimore in 2015. And then, as Sean mentioned, President Obama, under Loretta Lynch, under President Obama, came in to investigate the police department, and a new position was created for me, the chief of the Department of Justice, Compliance, Accountability, and External Affairs, where I worked on helping to negotiate the consent decree and then put in the structural, the infrastructure to actually move those reforms forward, which, as many of you all know, as dedicated as you are to your community work, can be the most difficult portion, is actually getting the work done. So I did that. Then I went to, I left. I was on a couple of monitoring teams, one in Cleveland where Tamir Rice lost his life. Then went back to the city to be the director of the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. And after I left, I continued to do this work across the country because the work really happens when you're on the ground with the men and women in the communities that are affected the most. So I'm happy to be here with you all today. I'm very, very excited for your opportunity to set up a civilian review board, the Inspector General, and all the great things that you all are moving forward with there. So I'll turn it back over to Sean and then come back for just a couple of comments at the end and any questions that you all might have.
Thanks, Ganesha. So just so that the board is aware kind of what our scope of work is in the areas that we're here to work with the police department and the city on, administration and leadership strategy is a big topic for us. Organizational structure in the department has been, I think it's on its third iteration of an organizational chart since we were engaged a few months ago. And now has a very solid plan moving forward for reorganizing. We've got a current plan, a kind of interim plan that will come into place, will start coming into place, I think, after tonight when the chief is officially sworn in, and then a prospective final plan moving forward. That has been produced in cooperation and collaboration between the chief and her staff, and we've given her some significant input on that in our previous site visit, which occurred about 3 weeks ago. In addition to those things and the organizational structure, we'll also be working with them on strategies for recruiting and retaining the right officers, officer safety and wellness initiatives and programming, of which Columbus is on the precipice of becoming a leader in terms of providing facility and kind of joint wellness services for the public safety, the agencies that fall under the public safety umbrella, including police, fire, and telecommunications, which is a really good place for the department and for the city to be. And we'll also be providing a significant amount of training through both the COPS office, a grantee of theirs called Crytech, which is a training provider on a myriad of topics, and the Bureau of Justice Assistance, which is another agency under the Department of Justice. The city has already embarked on significant de-escalation training program and response to a crisis program called Icat, which is really cutting edge and actually one of the few de-escalation programs that's based in scientific research, which is a good thing. In addition to that, I just want to follow up on something Ganesha said, and I'll be happy to yield the floor. This is a challenging time for all cities. It's certainly a challenging time for the city of Columbus, but it's also a really exciting time for the city and for its police department. And we're very happy and pleased that we could be part of this time with you. There is a new dynamic forming here. We're actually virtually seeing it, and you're part of it. This board, the Inspector General, the Police Department and Public Safety Division, and the dynamic that is really being transformed right now in terms of accountability gives just a really significant opportunity that a lot of cities don't have or haven't taken advantage of to further procedural justice both inside the police department and outside the police department, so that everyone in the city of Columbus, and particularly those who interact with the police, have the opportunity to experience fair and impartial treatment. And that's really the ultimate goal. So I look forward to working with you, Chair, and the rest of the board. Thank you. Ganesha?
Yes, just a few things, and I'm not 100% read in, obviously, on all the work that you all have already done, so forgive me if I'm telling you things that you already know. Madam Chair, as you can see, I mentioned NACO yesterday, and the Inspector General is all over that already. I just want to double down and really encourage you all, if you can, to get to that conference in Fort Worth, beyond learning a lot and networking. You might get some good barbecue. But I can't express enough that as you're forming and norming, having a network across the country to be able to ask how they do things, particularly because they're going to be in different stages of growth with their boards. And civilian review boards, as you all know, have been a big focus of community folks across the country. So they'll have your up-to-date both legislation and what's been happening across the country. So to the extent that you can get to NACOL, I suggest that you utilize them. I actually had a panel not too long ago on another project that I'm working on with 21CP to have inspector generals from across the country, including the executive director of NACOL, to talk about some of the issues, the way that they engage with the community, and how they build up their infrastructure. So that's just one thing I want to double down on. The second piece is I also mentioned the community outreach. As you all heard, I worked at the police department and the mayor's office, and we can always get very busy doing things and assume that the community knows. But particularly on boards like this, where I'm helping someone else, another department, put together a board like this, actually explaining to the community what you do and how you do it is critical. And so if I could give you any advice on that, certainly be very clear from the very beginning what you can and cannot do in that charter. Because unfortunately, and again, I know I'm preaching to the choir to a certain degree, but just in an effort to double down on it, you can lose integrity and credibility, not from the things that you do, but just doing what you're supposed to do, when in truth, you can't do it because the charter didn't enable you to do that. The last thing that I have here, or actually two more things. One, Madam Inspector General, as you're looking, and I'm sure you have already considered this, because I think you also mentioned that you were working on the outreach piece, is anonymous complaints. It's something that we've seen across the country. And there was pushback from law enforcement for a while, but I want to say in the last 3 to 4 years, that pushback has turned into a best practice. So I think it's wonderful that you're looking at how to do online submissions. I think that's great. Also, accessibility. We've learned through the pandemic that our marginalized communities have been disproportionately affected by the lack of broadband and Wi-Fi access. So having as many places to drop off those complaints, whether it's libraries or other public places, I think is important. But certainly that the anonymous piece is something that I've seen come up across the country in different places. And then the last thing that I'll say, if I was there, I would probably walk up to you and whisper this to you. But since I'm not there and I don't know when I'll be able to talk to you, I'm going to say it in front of everybody. You're building and you have a lot of momentum, and this is the opportunity for you to ask what you need. What I have seen, unfortunately, across the country with many of these boards, particularly if, and I don't know if this is your situation, your board members who are there giving of their time and talent for free have many other obligations in their lives. And so without appropriate staff, I have seen these cases get backlogged because, folks don't have the appropriate resources to staff the office. So I heard all the work that you're doing, and I'm sure that this is not an issue for you, but that's just my 2 cents to make sure to get what you need to push that work forward. So I think that's it. If there's any questions for the work, that we're doing in Columbus, for Sean or I, I'll turn the floor back over to you all. And thank you for the time to be able to speak with you and be a part of your process.
I encourage board members to utilize this opportunity to ask questions, and I'd say our first question.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for your time and for your work. I just had a question in terms of getting a sense of clear timeline that we're providing for the broader community. I know There are some who in the community have, were calling for, broader movement from the Department of Justice, calling for independent investigation into patterns and practices. This is, my understanding, is an invitation from the city leaders about a review, which is separate from those matters. But just so that the community is aware, just wanted to get a sense of what your previous experiences have been in other places where different outcomes resulted in different things. So, and kind of getting a sense of, obviously I know it's early, so it's hard to predict these matters, but is there a way that we can get a sense of a timeline and what potential outcomes could look like from this review?
Sure. So I think there's probably been some impact already in some of the work that we've done, particularly technical assistance that we've provided to the chief and her leadership team. In addition to some training recommendations, and then in addition to recommendations, we're actually getting training delivered here over the next several months. So, and that's being provided, as I stated, through our partners at the Department of Justice. I appreciate the question because I want to make sure that, what our role here is clear. We're not here doing an assessment. We're not here doing an investigation. That's not our decision. We do that kind of work, but that's not what we were hired to do here. And so we're really providing straight up, in real time, advice and assistance to the department and to the other agencies within the city that are integrated with law enforcement and policing. Great. So in terms of a time frame, I expect that we will probably have another site visit here within the next 2 months, and I'm not sure exactly what that will look like. We really try to do as much community engagement as we can in these projects, and you're part of that. You're part of that process too. But in addition to Ganesha, Jessica Drake is also here. She's on the ground today. She's actually meeting with the community liaison officers right now. There's a representative from the COPS office here today who's also at that meeting. And then, we will make opportunities available for anyone in the community to provide us with feedback, ask questions, make suggestions, raise concerns that would, help educate us and inform our work. So we try to be as inclusive as we can for as long as we can, and try to direct the best resources that we can under the limited scope that exists in this engagement for us. So I hope that's helpful to you.
I'd like to follow up in ways of follow-up to Mr. Strickland's question. I was asked a question yesterday by Ms. Martin, and I was unable to answer it. I do know that in past months that, and I don't know if it was an organization or just an individual, but there were people from Columbus who called for a full investigation that would end in a consent decree. And of course, that's not what we're talking about now. And I didn't know if there was an organization. I know that several organizations were created after the incidents of last May, but is there a particular group that has been calling for investigation hopefully resulting in a consent decree? I know that Attorney Walton has stated that's what he would like to see, but I don't know if that's just an individual's request or if he represents a group. Do you know?
If I remember correctly, I believe, and I don't have the title, but I think it's like the Police Accountability
Yeah.
Project is
Yes.
what he represents.
Yeah,
And that's a collective of individuals and groups.
The
Yeah.
Police Accountability Project.
Don't quote me on that title, but it's something similar to that.
Yeah, my understanding, it's more of a coalition, may or may not be officially an organization, but there's a coalition of individuals, other potential organizations that are part of that. And I think that was a call from some of the members for a full investigation, which is obviously separate from this matter, but that's my understanding.
Okay. As I said, I wasn't able to respond to the question. I thought maybe collectively we could do that today to provide some information. Question?
Are you working strictly with Columbus Police? Are you working with the Sheriff's Department and different suburbs at this point?
No, we are not. We are working specifically with the city of Columbus, the police department, the inspector general, the Division of Public Safety, and, any entities within the city that interact with or relate with the police department in terms of the provision of public service and public safety.
Okay. And you are involved with the training for new officers, is that correct?
We're not providing the training, but
No, but-
we've been to the academy, we've met with academy staff, we have reviewed the curriculum for new hires, we've made some suggestions in modifying that curriculum, and we've also provided and will continue to provide in-service training for officers within the department, and I believe that will be provided at the academy as well.
And what sort of change in training are you advocating that would change maybe the behavior or the status quo of what's been going on that you think would help the situation?
Well, one of the things that we will be providing is that Icat training that I mentioned earlier, and we'll just give you in a thumbnail kind of sketch of the basis of that training, but it's really designed to have officers create time, space, slow down when they're responding to critical emergency situations, and to de-escalate rather than kind of charge in, and maybe escalate the situation and put themselves or others in a situation where force is more imminent or force is required to be used. It's training that was developed by the Police Executive Research Forum, and as I said, it's really the only de-escalation training that I've seen that's actually been studied, and the studies have been very positive about it and its effectiveness. So that's one example. We're looking at a number of other trainings for the department based on what they feel like they need and what we know are the best providers of that type of training. And another area, and I'm not sure, I don't think I mentioned this, but it's a big one, that we're helping with is technology. The department is woefully in need of updating its technology. And I mentioned that in conjunction with training because really the future of training is deeply rooted in technology and having officers experience things in a more realistic situation or in a more realistic way than they would even a scenario-based kind of acting training. And so what I'm talking about there is virtual reality training, which is starting to be implemented across the country. It's also been studied. It's shown that it has 80% more retention and efficacy than just regular classroom training or even scenario-based training. So I know that's something that the academy is interested, the department's interested in, and we happen to know some of the best people in the business that are working to provide that type of training. So we're going to try to get them lined up with that as well. So it's pretty powerful
Sean,
stuff.
in addition to,
Yeah.
in addition to that, I'm looking here, I just lost my place here. In addition, we're looking at the curriculums for use of force, which includes de-escalation, fair and impartial policing, and community policing training as well.
Yep.
Thank you.
There's a percentage that you quoted, the 80%. Are you saying that is 80% of police forces that are currently using it are actually experiencing 80% more retention rate? Or are you just saying in general,
saying that-
one that does?
I'm saying that, and the research is, I think it's the University of Miami, but that did the research. But people who experience training through virtual reality retain 80% more than people who don't receive the same training in a different form.
But this is not currently being used in any police station or department in this country, though, right?
Oh, no, it's
Currently
being
on-
used,
it
it's being
is.
used all
Okay.
over the country, yeah,
In police stations?
in police departments,
Okay.
yes.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to get at. And I had
Yeah.
a secondary question, more on the results guide. I'd like to talk more about your analytics and your data that you are coming here with. Now, You have worked, I mean, if I'm understanding correctly, you're a consulting group, and
We are.
you have worked in other, you have done this before other places. What kind of success rate are we experiencing, or how are you even measuring whether your training updates, et cetera, are actually making the difference that you want it to make, or that the citizens would like?
That's hard to put a number on, because we don't have anybody that, like a institution of higher learning, that's following us around and actually saying, okay, this group, like, studying the metrics. I can tell you that, our experience just amongst our partners and the various consent decree cities that we work in, based on that experience and work, and then a number, and by the way, you can go to our website, you can look at at reports we've done for other police departments, including cities this size, larger, smaller, and several universities and colleges. The results, we've been doing this for 5 years, so I think, it would be really difficult for any researcher to say long-term, like, what's the impact. The impact of the task force report, on which a lot of our work is founded, which came out in 2016, has been very positive across the field for departments that implemented the recommendations. So I think that's a fair question, but it's one that I'm not equipped to answer, and we wouldn't know.
And if I may, if you're asking about us in particular, Sean has addressed it, but one of the things that I think is really important for Columbus, there's been a lot of studies, a lot of recommendations, a lot of things that have happened as it relates to police reform and changes. And so, one of the things we are looking at is, are those things working? Have those things been implemented? And does the community feel like change is being made? So if you're asking your question to any extent as it relates to Columbus specifically, I'd love to have a conversation with you or anyone else who has some thoughts about, what I would call, what you're asking about is accountability for the things that folks said are going to be done, or even during our work, which is technical assistance alongside and supporting, if there are things that have been implemented and you as a community member, or even as this board, want to track it to see if it's actually making a difference in the police department and in the community, then that's certainly, this time is the time for you all to be having those conversations as a community, for sure.
Other questions? Yes.
You mentioned organizational structure changes, I think.
Yes.
Can you expound on that?
I don't want to get ahead of the chief, but
So let me just.
Yeah, please.
I've been thinking about future meetings, and it seems to me that having the chief herself come in, and I think the timing would be around, I was trying to, follow you. There's a certain point when certain things will, I'll say, end. It's time to implement, so it's
Yeah.
around the implementation time. So I would have a conversation with her about not only that, but then going to the last point also around accountability, to have this board updated on the implementation of the recommendations that came from the Safety Advisory Commission and from Matrix. So if she were to do all of that in a meeting, it would be probably the entire meeting. But I think that's probably the way we should go, is to actually invite the chief in to share all of this with her. I'm very interested in the structure also, when I heard that.
Exactly, because I was curious as to how, is that just implemented to help the police department, or does that spill over to the community, is what I was going to ask you, but we can scratch that. How about this one? You mentioned recruiting and retention. Can you name something in general that police departments aren't doing in recruiting and retention? Just one thing maybe that we're not doing.
Sure.
Well,
I mean, one of the biggest areas where I see departments, and this happens to be an area that I kind of specialize in, so I'm really glad to get this question. But probably the biggest part in today's recruiting world that I see police departments, really lacking in is using technology and recruiting and leveraging technology. And let me just give you an example of that. And, you know, I think we all understand the world that we live in and the age of folks who are looking to enter into a profession like policing. And it's not, you know, when I graduated from college, you sent somebody a letter and a resume, like on paper. That's a foreign concept to most young people seeking a job today. We're having a hard time in policing and in public service generally catching up with the times. Some of that is because you're kind of restricted by rules like a police and fire board commission rules or civil service rules that require a lot of different people to touch a file for applications to be made a certain way and processed a certain way. It's a lengthy process. Today's potential employees are looking to move very rapidly, very fast. And when you can't move rapidly and fast, which you can't, I mean, that's just the structure of hiring officers, you've got to constantly touch them. And so there's ways to do this. I mean, everybody, I've got one in my pocket here. I suspect those of you who don't have yours on the table in front of you have it in your pocket or your pocketbook, is a cell phone. There's these text messages things that we all get periodically. Some of us probably get a lot more of them during the day than you think. One way to stay in touch with applicants is to create a system using technology to touch them on a regular basis and let them know where they are at in the process. If they have a piece of information, like for instance, we still need your high school transcript, could you please bring it by? Remind them of things that need to be brought in for their application to be completed. And then once that you've got everything, inform them at different steps along the process so that they know. One thing that we have found working in police departments, and Baltimore happens to be one that's extremely challenged in recruiting. They're in an area, they're right near DC. There's several police departments in the area. Many of them pay more than Baltimore does. You know what? It doesn't matter. We've actually studied this. You know what matters the most? Who calls them first? And today you can go online through a number of different websites, submit an application, and it will go to, in most services for free, will let you send your application or your interest to 3 departments. The first department to call you back, we've seen people do this at 2 o'clock in the morning, and the police department will call them back at 2 o'clock in the morning and say, hey, just saw that you put in an application. I just wanted to touch base with you and let you know. We're really excited to talk to you about this. Can we set up a time when you can talk to one of our recruiters? They have a system in place. They capture the cell phone number, the email. They stay in touch with the applicants. That's a very small minority of police departments that go to that length to recruit. But that's really what you have to do, because most people today are applying for multiple jobs in multiple places, which you can do very easily. I mean, you do it real easily with this. You can do it on your phone in most cases. And even though there may not be people intending to compete with each other, the competition is there. And so it's not uncommon to see somebody apply for a job in Columbus, Ohio, and Boise, Idaho. And if Boise, Idaho calls first, guess where they're going? Boise, Idaho. So that's really, sorry, that may have been a longer answer than you, but I told you this is like an area I'm honed in on.
So to your example, the technology would make that go faster. You believe that is, because it sounds more like a quantity over quality sort of situation when we're just sort of opening up that door wide open.
It's really both. You have to have both quantity and quality, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm not suggesting that you would lower standards or anything like that. I mean, that's not the point. The point is, you're fishing in a shallow pond, and that's not just related to police. Like, that's true across the board. So, you know, people have a lot of different options, And unless unless you're talking about somebody who for one reason or another, some folks are like legacies where my grandfather was a policeman, my father was a policeman, my brother's a policeman, I'm going to be a policeman. And that's the they're going to apply only for police jobs. But the fact of the matter is most folks are applying for jobs in different industries. And this goes to another issue, which is retention, because that's the other challenge that's coming, and it's being experienced in a lot of places now. The lifespan of an employee staying with one employer is getting shorter. And so we see a lot of folks, used to be you got a job as a policeman or a fireman, you were there until you earned the pension, right? You were there for 20, 25, 30 years. We're losing people in policing in particular between 4 and 7 years. And so this is not a problem that if you're going to have retention issues at between 4 and 7 years, that really kind of, I think, highlights and enhances the need to constantly be recruiting, to constantly be hiring, and being and hiring in anticipation of openings, recruit in anticipation of the need. And so you don't find yourself in a situation like most departments are in today, where there's a great need, and the pond is very shallow.
I want to thank you for joining us today. I don't know if we'll have an opportunity in the future to have you back as you are completing your work with the City of Columbus and our police department. But on behalf of the entire board, we truly thank you for your time and sharing this information with us today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Martin. I think we've come to a time when we should have a break. Let's go for about 10 minutes. I'm showing about 3:19, so let's try to come back at 3:30. And then to give you a heads up in terms of committee reports, we'll start with training, and then we'll go to community engagement, and then I'll kind of take a look at where we are in terms of time. One other thing I will share with you before we leave, and I just found out about this yesterday. Our chief is being sworn in, officially sworn in today. Chief Bryant and Assistant Chief Potts both successfully passed their State of Ohio OPATA. She's being sworn in at 6 o'clock at the Training Academy, and I know there are huge rooms over there, so without asking anyone's permission, I'm just sharing this with you, and if you wanted to go see her being sworn in, I suggest that you do it, okay? Okay, we're on break.
as I give this report, I'm going to pull up some of the things that we talked about. We looked at the curriculum that we have covered thus far and what could be potentially added to it and how we can move forward. And so we broke the training down basically into 3 years, so year 1, year 2, and year 3. And there were a couple of things. The media training and just the CRB process, so that's training topic 1 that we thought should definitely be covered in year 1. We still think we need some media training because we haven't had that just yet, but I'm pretty sure everybody at some point has been reached out by the media reached out by the media and approached by the media, so we thought about that. The other trainings, the discipline and investigation, arbitration, collective bargaining, and just cause discipline, we thought that was good for year 1. We also would like to have some kind of training on the internal affairs process, figuring out where that would be. Moving forward, we suggested that would probably be good in year 1, just so people can understand what the process looks internally for the Columbus Division of Police, and then how that aligns with the Inspector General and what they're doing in their investigation, and then our work, how that overlays, just how all of that aligns together. The implicit bias and the cultural competency, we had a discussion about that training. We definitely agree that it should be in year 1. We thought it would probably be better suited as one comprehensive training versus separated out like we did this time, and just figuring out a way to do that. And I know we had also discussed whether or not to use the same trainers or to perhaps explore some new trainers moving forward for future years. And so, you know, we'll get everybody's feedback on that and their thoughts about that. But we were open. But then the other things that we thought should definitely stay, the ABCs of policing, going to the academy and doing that scenario-based training, we thought all of that was important, the de-escalation. We really, really liked Furby's presentation that he gave. It was very informative, straight to the point. We all learned a lot from that. So using that, though, we also thought it would be good to have Furby come back periodically with legal updates, and do that throughout like the year 1, year 2, and year 3. Just as new things come, just give us updates as they are needed. And then we looked at perhaps doing year 1 and 2 brief mini refreshers during years 2 and years 3 of the trainings that we had during year 1, just on an as-needed basis. So those are some of what we have. We have it built out in a chart I can share with you, and you can send it out if you want. Yeah, because it's kind of laid out. I'm just reading it here. But for the most part, we thought the trainings that we had this year were good and sufficient. We really didn't have any additional, add to it.
Well, certainly something, and the Inspector General had mentioned this to me, and then you heard it again today, this NACOL group, which evidently, the real purpose is to service people like us who actually serve on the boards. So I have given myself the assignment of finding out more information about it. I know that the conference is September, and then with the Inspector General talking to Finance, what does it really mean in terms of they're supporting our ability to go? And I don't know that we would be looking at 11 people going, at one time, but to come back with some information and some thoughts around that, because it sounds as if that's a resource that we really should be utilizing.
Absolutely.
I mean, just the way the AIG is for our Inspector General, so I'll get more information about that. Okay.
Great. And then I just wanted to ask any of the committee members if you had anything that you wanted to add based on our meetings and conversations that we had about training.
I would just say, I think especially the refreshers are going to be important, because when members, not every member cycle is going to be the same. So you're going to have some drop off early. And so you can have the refresher points that, and we'll have to kind of refine how this works, but you do refresher for everybody every year. And then a longer version of that is something where newer members would have to go into. We'll have to obviously talk about what that might look like, but I think those refresher courses are helpful.
As you talked about that, did you identify specific ones? Because we're really going into year 2. And so as we're going into year 2, Inspector General is on board, our work may really beginning to start. I mean, what would you lift up as needing a refresher sooner rather than later?
We will put that on the agenda for our next meeting to discuss, because we haven't
It is
covered
now an
that.
agenda item. Thank you.
We will
Chair.
make sure it's on the agenda item to discuss. And one of the things I mentioned it, but when I first started, is, to make an apology to Gambit, because he has really not been a part of this, so we would definitely like to get his input. I think either I had his incorrect email address or there was some glitch there. So we want to make sure that we get his thoughts and opinions on this moving forward as well.
And then to the members of the board who, and you don't serve on the training committee, would love to hear your thoughts in terms of, now that we've been doing this for, almost a year. Are there topics that come to mind where, where you'd like to delve into them further, or new topics? Any thoughts from?
Well, I did have one thought, and that is, are we videotaping the trainings so that as people are added to the board, we could, rather than simply repeat, Mr. Furby's presentation was just referenced, and I thought it was excellent as well. But having that available so that somebody in the onboarding process we could say, over the next 3 months, we'd like you to go through these 6 trainings. Even if we had a refresher, we're not going to get that. And so, there would be a 3-year loop or something before we come back to that kind of training. So I don't know if is this being recorded in a way that somebody could access these trainings?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And is that the plan, that we would onboard via, asking somebody to watch specific trainings?
I think we would need to have a discussion about that. I mean, this just might be me and my learning, but I'm not a video watcher. I mean, I like the live audience and the live presenter. So certainly, it would be an option, but I think we need to look at a combination.
Yeah, so this came up, not in our last meeting, but one of the meetings that we had prior to, and just how there's something to be said when you go to training with other people, and we specifically talked about when we went down to the police academy and had the scenario training, and how it's helpful to have some of the other board members. So we were thinking, if we onboard, a couple of new board members at the same time, then collectively, then that's basically a cohort, then they can go through the training together, and they can also go down to the academy together to kind of get that training all at the same time.
No, I agree with that, because we don't get too many perks for being on this board. I'm just being for real, and that's one that I really enjoyed because of the camaraderie. Just being able to be in the mix with those whom we serve with, and learn a little bit more about personalities.
Absolutely, Mayor.
Case law is always changing and in
Yes,
a flux,
that's-
and so to go watch recordings is sometimes useless in a way. And I
Because it
like the
changes.
camaraderie business.
No, I
Yeah.
understand, yeah.
In criminal law especially.
Yeah, I think some mix of recordings, right? Because we've already seen an instance where members haven't made a meeting, for example, they have to watch the recording of a particular meeting. And then I think we could work with the city around modules that they might have as well. But I think, to other points that have been made, which is, to expect onerous, training opportunities where people have to do that alone, I think is difficult, which is why the cohort model is helpful so that we can train larger groups in future iterations of the board. So we're going to work on that. That'll be the next agenda item as well.
And because of something you said, I did not do this earlier, and I need to note it for our public record that Mr. Aaron Thomas was unavailable for the meeting today. He did communicate it with us, and his absence is noted and approved. Any other comments about training? You know, one of the things that I will certainly try to do around this organization is just to see maybe a syllabus of what they actually, offer, the kind of topics, et cetera, and get that to you sooner rather than later as you're working on this.
That'd be great.
Okay? Anything else on training?
The only thing else is we will get you that spreadsheet
Thank
that we
you.
have kind of outlined what year
Okay.
1, year 2, and year
Yeah.
3 looks like, so you can share it.
That'll be helpful. Okay. Then our next committee that we're going to hear from is community engagement.
Thank you. We have had, for our Community Engagement Committee, we've had 3 meetings. When I met with IG Hendricks, this was our, our most important topic that we discussed. And then I had a telephone conversation with Ms. Ross, because she is going to get for me the list for community, she indicated, and the civics, and the different organizations. She said she would attempt to do that for me this week.
Okay.
Sometime, which I think is going to be very important. But what is the goal of our community engagement? Basically, it's to let those groups know that the board exists and the IG exists. And how will a grievance be filed? And this is going to be, this is something that the IG and I spoke about, and it's something that she's in the process of putting together. So we're waiting, because we have to have a message, and so we have to know how that's going to be done. But when we go out to the community, we will be put on their agenda when we decide which groups, and that will be done as soon as Ms. Ross, and she's been very good. We've had some conversations, and we will put those groups together. Our committee will meet again as soon as I get that list. And then we will get our message, and they will know how a grievance will be filed. And we will have to get across to these groups somehow that no repercussions or harm will come to them from filing this complaint. They have to know that, and we'll have to meet with the committee and the IG, and we have decided that we will begin by working in tandem, the IG and the board, at this particular time. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
okay, good. And number 3, the reason why it's important to go out to the community is because we need to listen to the community, hear from them, so that we will know what it is that they want from us, and build trust. That's the reason why it's so important.
And let me just interrupt you just for a
Sure,
moment.
sure.
Because I made note of this yesterday and again today from Ms. Martin's comments. We have to be really clear about what we can and what we cannot do. Because you may, in your listening, you may be hearing from community members things that they want us to do that we simply cannot do. So we need to be very prepared as we have these conversations on that point.
Thank you, yeah. And also, our committee discussed that our role the CRB role should be more than just investigating misconduct, but we should maybe also be looking at maybe some policy modifications as our goal. And we would gather this from the community. They would be giving us input, these different organizations, and maybe we can relay this to, and this is where, we're beginning, we're laying a foundation, and I'm not exactly sure how all this will work, but maybe we could influence policy by what we hear in the community. And maybe through what's going on here with DOJ. But this community engagement has to be sustained and it has to be ongoing. And I've already kind of touched on this. How are we going to do this? We will prioritize priority groups, will be asked to be put on their agenda, and then I will get in touch with the IG through email, we've already discussed that, and set up the meetings and go. She indicated, IG, Hendricks indicated that she would be willing to, since we don't have a budget, she would be willing to do the flyers. And if we needed and wanted to go that way, and that's what we would do. So from here, what will we do? We'll go, we'll set up another committee meeting, and I will be in touch with Ms. Ross and IG Hendricks.
So recalling the IG's engagement plan, I think it pretty much, and these are meetings completely separate from, what we're talking about, the community meetings. It goes through June, if not into July. So are we talking about really implementing these community meetings probably in August, September?
And that's something that Ms. Ross and I discussed earlier last week. I can't remember what day it was, but anyway. Because we're not going to have that message yet. She starts, by July 11th. We were thinking we should go probably before, but I don't think it's going to.
Before what?
Before July 11th, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Are you talking about beginning these meetings?
I think it's probably August.
And I would say so because, again, there is a still personal engagement plan. And it's, there are a lot of people in groups on that. And then just all of the work that goes into setting it up. So I think we should be realistic. So it would be great if the committee had the plan literally laid out, where you're going, sort of when. I'd say starting maybe in, August, September, and be able to share that with the board. And again, I think we talked about area commissions.
Right.
And I think there are 21 area commissions that I recall. So we're starting there. And I think I made a generic request that hasn't been fulfilled. And this was around maps. That I wanted us to be able to literally see the city.
Yeah.
And I think that they are already available.
That's an Attorney Ross is supposed to.
Yes.
Oh,
That's
okay.
what she's
She's going to do that, okay. Because the city's actually, there is a specific map that shows where the area commissions are. Yes, okay.
She was in here earlier. I think that's her code.
Yeah, she's still somewhere in the building.
Now that's my
She just
code.
stepped out of the room.
Yeah. Oh, that's your code. Sorry.
And
Somebody's.
I also asked for.
Yeah, she'll be back.
Right, a map, and I don't know if we need to have a discussion about them. I was hoping that we could have a map that would inform us as to where various ethnic groups maybe have a greater population, whether it's up on 161 or just wherever, to have them listed in terms of who are the citizens of Columbus, and then are there just certain areas that may be more populated by certain ethnicities than others? Because I think that'd be informative
Absolutely.
for all of us.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
I will do that.
So really the time frame then of starting these meetings, we're probably talking August.
That's probably more
Okay.
realistic.
And to be realistic as to how many per month. I think that's something else we need to also, keep in mind, because there's just, so much work involved with that. So some thoughts around that.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that we have 5 in our group. Not all of us have to go to all of them, and the IG is going to be busy. We know that, so.
And not, I would say beyond, and this is why I'd like to have this matrix sort of laid out, because it's just not the 5 of you. There are 11 of us. We need to
True.
always make sure that there are 5 or fewer, that we never get to 6, because that constitutes a public meeting.
Right, right.
But certainly, I'm just guessing without asking everyone, that we will all want to participate
Great,
in this.
okay.
We're not asking 5 of you to do this all on your own.
That's nice, good.
If there's like a calendar that lists like the location and then perhaps signups, then I think,
Yes.
we can kind of divvy out the work and all go to a couple of them.
Okay. Does anyone else in the group want to, or anyone?
I agree that we need to not rush into this, because I think that wherever we go, the importance is that we all have the same message, and that we don't deviate from whatever the message is that we have all agreed to get out, and to make sure that we, as well as the IG, are on the same page in our messaging, because you know how the public is, they love to find some way to kind of try to trip us up and divide us or take something completely out of context. So I think that it's very important that we take our time and we work with our IG as she works along, to develop her community engagement plan, that we work along with her so that we're all on the same page.
I will say, I texted Attorney Ross, so she is in another meeting, she's coming back in the room, but she says she does have the maps, the most updated ones. Neighborhoods actually sent it over to her today, so then she will be sending it out to everybody.
Okay.
And it has contact lists for everybody as well, so you'll be able to get in contact.
Thank you.
Anything else for,
Yes, I just had some questions in terms of plans for community engagement overall, right? So we're talking about initial plans for the board to start this initial outreach. But as far as the board presents itself to the broader community, does your committee have thoughts on what that will look like? So for example, this outreach plan is, members of the board going to community associations, but are there scenarios and points in time in which there are openings in which these meetings are more public because of a particular scenario or set of events? Because I think there is something to be said too for a space, a public open meeting, for a space in which the community members can come and it's reserved time, for example, to talk about specific business. I just wasn't sure if there was any thoughts about how forward-facing we would be as a civilian review board down the road. Not right now. I think right now it makes sense in terms of we don't have people knocking on the doors to join these civilian review board meetings because we're talking about the foundation. But I do think down the road there might be space for these meetings to be more open. And I just wasn't sure if there's thoughts about what that might look like or could look like in the future.
and this is where a refresher course might be needed, because isn't there something, in the charter? I know we talked about it, because I remember specifically about engaging with the community. Because I shared a thought, I didn't want it to be like the Safety Advisory Commission, where we went to City Hall and people had to come to us. Could we create that space and opportunity to go into the community? So we just touched on it maybe early on. Excellent point. We just have to figure out how to do that. So I guess that would be a part of this committee's work also, in terms of how does the board leave this space and go into the community?
Well, I would think, and correct me if I would think that we would be placed on, for example, the Linden Commission. I'm just picking something. That we would be placed on their agenda. They would know, that specific community would know that we would be on the agenda for that evening. And so they would know that they could come that evening and ask questions. We would make a short presentation, and they would ask questions.
So I think, I agree. I think that's a good goal for us to have. And I was just saying, in addition, I do think having more larger sized opportunities for the Civilian Review Board to engage with community. Again, you'd have to structure it in a way in
Can you be
which-
more specific?
So, for example, let's say we are more established and we decided that after a year of our work, we are going to publish a report or whatever our findings are, and we're going to present that to the community. And so it would be like this type of meeting, but perhaps we would hold it in a larger space, and there's a dedicated portion of, questions. Again, you'd have to limit it so it's not just, unwieldy, but I do think having some space where people, because just generally, not everybody's going to go to a civic association meeting or area review meeting, but I do think, I don't know the specifics of how you'd actually operate that and make it work, but I would like an opportunity for the public to feel like they could walk in here and be part of, and be a part of what's going on with the Civilian Review Board. Not sure logistically what that looks like, but I was hoping the Community Engagement Committee could think about how that might work.
We could.
Okay.
I mean, it's a thought, that's interesting, and that's a good thought, and I will write that down, and we will think about it.
Sounds good.
Because I'm not sure, just, like, for example, this room here, or something like this, would the public come during, maybe they would.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Maybe.
right now, when we're talking about bylaws and basics, not really, but if there's a moment in which public input, we're asking for public input for whatever
Yeah.
reason, that could be an opportunity.
You might want to go back, and I'm not sure, I don't carry my report around with me. But if we look at the published report from the Safety Advisory Commission, I don't know what was noted in there about the public meetings that we held. So for example, approximately how many people, attended. They were in council chambers, but it wasn't as if they were overrun, with people. So it just might give us a little guidance if there were any comments in the report about the public hearings that might just give a little guidance.
I was thinking that, a really good scenario that, Kyle might be bringing up is, we will be, the next stage of this for all of us is that we will be reviewing cases that will be coming before us, that the office will be presenting. There could be some pretty charged sort of situations where the public might want to, not even the public, I'm sorry, let me say, we might want, for example, the input of the family members that were affected in this situation. And I think that would be a situation where we would have to open, some time for us to be able to hear, their grievances and how, because I think it's not unfair to say that we will from time to time find ourselves in situations where we might need more input than just this 11 room, right? Like, how is this going to affect the community the way we decide to, I don't know, the suggestions or what are they called? Recommendations. The recommendations that we decide to provide the Office of IJ. So that is, I guess, where I see some of that need being required in the future. So, I don't know, do you agree, or is that something completely different?
Yeah, so I wouldn't be able to speak to the specifics of the scenarios in which, we avail ourselves more broadly to the broader public, because I know there are going to be circumstances in which, we don't want to impede a particular investigation as it's ongoing. However, what I would want to make clear, though, is that there is a space that a role of the Civilian Review Board is to be accountable to the public. And so when there are instances that are charged, or even before those situations occurring, I just want to provide more spaces and opportunities. Now, I get it. I think a lot of us have these different meetings, and sometimes 3 people show up, right? But there are other times in which there are higher instances in which there will be a lot of people asking questions. That's why I think laying the groundwork that there's a certain thing that we can do as Civilian Review Board members that are within our purview, and there are other things that are within the Department of Inspector General, that are within the mayor's office, that are within City Council, that are within CPD. But I do think providing some sort of public posture and space is going to be important in the future for everybody to be able to participate in.
So I'm thinking, perhaps, because it sounds like we got two different trains of thoughts here. One is to provide updates to the community, and if that is the case, then I think, the outreach committee can go back and look and see if the IG is going to be producing like an annual report. And so during that time, that creates an opportunity to have a public meeting. We might have to look at the Safety Commission and see what was done. But then we can share, how many investigations happened, what were the outcomes, that sort of thing, like what the workload basically looked like, and then, answer any questions that may come up. But then in the same vein, on the other train of thought, it seems as though providing a space for family members to come and, share their thoughts about, the investigation. I don't think we can impede an investigation, but if there's something like that, then that's kind of a separate, different type of public meeting, and there's a different reason for that public meeting. So I think the training and, the outreach committee kind of probably needs to go back and think of, what is going to be the purpose of the public meetings, and then that'll kind of help craft, whether or not it's going to be conducted one way in alignment with perhaps an annual report or something like that, or if it's going to be like once or twice a year where we just, go to like a rec center or maybe even down to City Hall and, let people fill out a slip, get 3 minutes to make a comment or something like that. I think there probably needs to be some clarification on the purpose of the meeting.
Certainly, and I think that track might fit under some of the rules and regulations piece, because they're currently, I don't know if somebody just was in the audience and had a question, for example, to ask of us, I don't know if there's an actual process for that, like what that would look like. And so in the future, it might make sense if we have like an open comment, I don't know, some part on the agenda for if there's any comments from the public, and they'd have to do the same thing that they do with city council, which is submit a slip ahead of time and all sorts of things like that. So I think that's kind of where that type of track might go. It still fits within the broader purview of community engagement and how we present ourselves to the public.
I'm very cautious about doing anything with the public other than who we are and what we do. Opening it up to comments, questions, who's going to handle those? Are we going to all be on the same page? I'm very cautious about that. Secondly, the infrastructure in place to set all of this up, where does that come from?
So, yeah, no, that's a really good point. I mean, I don't think we will always be on the same page, but I do think the space, I'm not saying it has to happen right now, but I do think there should be an infrastructure set up for that. Now, if we determine, hey, those specific questions are going to be directed to the Department of Inspector General or directed elsewhere, then that might be a particular thing we do. But I can't imagine scenarios in which people have questions of the board and, I don't know if the chair responds or others respond. Again, there'd have to be a process by which we would do that, but I don't know.
So we have a Rules and Regulations Committee that doesn't clearly have a charter. We only have 3 members. It is chaired by Ms. Burns, members Fluharty and Aragon. I'm going to see if there's anyone else who wants to serve on that committee, up to 2, because remember, committees never, no, I think maybe just 1, because these are meetings that I want to attend, and if I'm there, I would make 6. So if someone has an interest in serving on this committee, please do so. But let me also just share, perspective. I see us as quasi-judicial.
There you go.
As quasi-judicial. And so if I was sitting on a case, members of the public would not be able to just come into my courtroom, ask questions, make statements. I personally feel very strongly about that. But I would agree that we need to have some rules and regulations around, this, so it's just not me. But that's the body that we are. That's who we are. We're quasi-judicial. So again, if someone has a real interest in serving, and then I think we need to really have a conversation. And something else that's been swirling around, and I've been thinking about it, we've been talking about going to meetings. We've been talking about, materials. So when we meet with Ms. Davis tomorrow, I mean, there has to be a resource that's going to write and put together all of these materials. I can tell you, it is not your chair. So, and it's more, the IG, and I don't know if we're going to have staff that we can utilize, but the materials need to be created. And then I would think if the timing works out, I would actually like to have the board see the materials before they go to kind of final print. And right around the same time, maybe even in the same meeting, that media training that you're talking about. Now, because I think that media training might also be very helpful to board members when you're going out and you're not planning on speaking to the media, you're planning on speaking to the public. But we need to be, I'd say, fairly on this, not only in the same hymnal, but on the same page, in terms of what we are saying. When we're doing that. So, again, figuring out the schedule gets to be, whatever. Certainly when the charter said we must meet only 4 times a year, we are surpassing that, And again, as we've just been talking today, more and more things are being added. But I would like to turn over to the rules and regulations, this topic that you just heard, okay? And getting those in place so we'll be ready, when the time, comes.
Attorney Russ came in, I know we had a couple of questions for
It was about a couple of requests around maps. One, the city showing the various area commissions, and then I wanted to know if there was a map that kind of showed our population.
So there is the full list of all of the area commissions. I had the Department of Neighborhoods fill in contacts for each one of them for Mary pursuant to our conversation that we had last week. So I have that list. They gave it to me. I will send that to you today. So you have it before end of day, and then we'll look into that second map that you're talking about. I'm pretty sure that there is one.
And I don't know, because I heard about it being sent, and at least, I only have the capacity to print 8.5 by 11. So I'm maybe one that would want to see this paper map that the Department of Neighborhoods already has, or at least a larger version of it. The eyes aren't what they used to be.
Take a field trip to the Department of Neighborhoods.
That could be a good thing, Let's see. Were you finished, Mary?
Yes. I just have a lot of work to do.
Well, I mean, this is what I wanted. I simply, I wanted the committee chairs and the committees to share kind of where they are and what they're thinking, so that the full board, knows and can have input.
I guess one final thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in agreement with you that we are quasi-judicial, and that there's a difference between the IG and us. We will, and Ms. Ross and I kind of discussed this, that we'll start out going out together, but we do perform different functions. And my belief is that we shouldn't be getting into the investigative aspect of, we shouldn't be answering questions that relate to the case. We shouldn't get near that, is my belief. And we may not want to be getting involved with families and their group and what's going on there, because we have to be an impartial body.
That's what she was saying.
Yes. So I don't think that the community engagement is going to be all that difficult as soon as we get our message down. What we want to do is make the public aware of who we are and what our message and how to file, and not be afraid that there are going to be repercussions.
I think Kyle and I were raising our hands to say the same thing, because the two of us, along with Rich, we make up the Professional Standards of Conduct Subcommittee, and we have a document that talks about, which pulls from both the Judicial Canon of Ethics, it pulls from the NACOL standards, it also pulls from the Professional Code of Conduct for lawyers that talk about some of those exact things, like impartiality, not engaging in our own investigations. So we do have a very nicely typed out document that we can send to everyone.
Well, I'm gonna get you to, I'd say send it, but then it would, probably should be a topic of conversation after we
Yes,
receive it.
absolutely, absolutely. We had a draft in case that's something that we all need to talk about, but just to let Mary know, that's not being considered.
Okay.
I think that's the,
And there's a committee assigned to that specific topic.
yeah, yes.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think to add on, I mean, there's a number of the details there that, again, we will all have clarity on as board members and with the Department of Inspector General. But a lot of these situations, we are not going to be just, I mean, by charter and also by operation, we're not going to be like in the weeds of individual cases. And so, I do hesitate in terms of, like, so in terms of making sure that our integrity and impartiality is followed, and that we are open to members of the public, which includes everybody. And so I think it's a little bit of a balance there in terms of how we obviously posture ourselves, but I do want to make sure that we're not so closed down because we're worried about specifics. Now, again, perceived conflicts, actual conflicts, obviously we need to be aware of and recuse yourselves from those situations. But I still think the framework of how we're actually operating can still be quasi-judicial, but we're not going to be like going through individual cases in the way that the Department of Inspector General is going through.
I have something like that.
Yes.
All that's nice. Everything you guys have said is real nice. But there's not one day that me, even in the midst of my peers, are either dealing with congregants or some people just in my community, that they do not try to engage me in situations that I know I should not be in, okay? Because we have to be very careful, and I keep saying this, because it's easy to talk about it in here, but people are tricky. When you go to these meetings with the various commissions, you gotta be real careful, because words have power, words have meaning, and if your message is not in line with what we expect as a board, and so that we don't say anything that goes against what the IG has in place, we are opening ourselves up for a can of worms. And I'm just telling you, because I've had people try to trick me into saying something just so that they could have something either negative or positive to go tell somebody. And most of the time, my constant message is, we are still in the foundational portion of this board, where we're trying to figure out exactly what it is that we are going to do. And I just leave it like that. But we have to be very careful, because folk have their own hidden agendas. They will try to trick you into saying something that they can use not only against this board, but against the IG, against our mayor, and so we just have to be very careful. That's why me personally, I want us to have a specific message. Now, we may not all say it quote unquote word for word verbatim the same, but at least we have the same message.
Thank you.
I'm curious, questions to the board. Has any of you taken actual interviews with the press or the media?
This isn't well,
Yeah, I know. Well, yeah, definitely.
no. I wasn't talking about, well, do you mind if I share just a tad?
Yes.
I can just share, what Reverend Tatum was talking about was not a media situation.
Okay.
I mean, someone approached him with certain allegations, wanted to, I think, speak to me, speak to the IG, and we had conversation, and then after hearing all of this, gave the person a number to have a conversation in the prosecutor's office, because it really could have been kind of an anti-stalking type thing, right? So that's just maybe, one example of how you might be personally approached. I wasn't talking about the media. These are just individuals.
Yeah, no, but my question is specifically to that, to the media question though, like, because I thought since like day one, we all said and agreed as a board that we weren't gonna be doing interviews, right? Or did I not hear that right? Because I thought, so, and I know,
No.
no, we were not,
No.
okay,
It was not that cut and dry.
Got
No.
it. Okay.
So I agree with Dr. Jones, media training should be back on our agenda. I think somewhere in this notebook that is a phone number of a colleague of yours that I was supposed to talk to. So right now, I can just tell you, and I won't say struggling, I'm just trying to, without adding additional meetings, we've talked about a number of different things, today, for future meetings, and it's a lot, and getting all of that done. It sounds as if standards of professionalism, that there is a draft document. So my suggestion would be from your committee, why don't you first, send it to me, and then let me figure out on which agenda I can put that particular item.
Sure.
Okay?
It's brief and, fairly clear. It covers conflicts of interest and,
Okay.
and ex parte
So
investigation.
maybe,
that sort
so
of thing.
maybe even the next meeting, again, just looking at it. Rules and regulations, you now have even more work to do, and you're working with the IG, and I am thinking that a good portion of the May meeting for the agenda will be you and the IG. Is that,
Yeah, I think so. The IG and I have connected about getting our subcommittee together with her and maybe Ms. Ross or Laura, someone from the city's office, to put some legs on process. But we can also add to that the question of public comment and what does that look
All of
like?
that.
Or if there is, because there might already be, as we've mentioned NACOL a lot today, like there's not necessarily a need to reinvent the wheel. There are organizations who are connected that do this work that have already parsed through a lot of this. And so being able to just figure out what's the best fit for what we're hoping to do. So yeah, IG and I had talked about trying to have some sort of draft to give the whole board.
and again, in terms of timing, would want the deadline to be in terms of getting the materials out to the board no later than that first Tuesday in May. And then Colleen will have to do a poll of us, but I will just ask you to look at the second and third Tuesdays to see if either one of those would work for you, same time. Well, there I go again. I'm assuming we can just magically be in this space, and that's not necessarily the case. We'll have to figure out the where we would be in terms of a meeting. And I believe that brings us to the nominating committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On March the 17th, our committee met, which involved myself, Mary Younger, Aaron Thomas, and the purpose was to examine the names of current board members who might have interest in assuming the office of chair and vice chair of our Civilian Police Review Board, term, I believe, of 1 year. As we met, it did not take long because we did not have any other names than our current chair and the vice chair who shared interest in having another term, serving another term on our review board. So with that being said, so that I can keep this short and sweet, on behalf of our committee, we would like to submit to this board our slate, that being of Janet Jackson as our chair for the Civilian Police Review Board for another term of 1 year, as well as Ms. Brooke Burns as vice chair, serving another term for 1 year, and that is our slate that we would submit to the board at this time.
Having heard from the committee, and I didn't check Robert's Rules of order, but I think it's appropriate for the chair to then ask, are there any other nominations from the floor for either chair or vice chair?
I don't know if this is a point of order. I have a question.
Yes?
Okay. So I'm no other nominations here. In terms of how we do this in the future, is there going to be a process where I don't know if there needs to be a timeline where we need to know who the nominated candidates are and, ahead of time and that before any votes are made or anything like that. I just was, again, I don't disagree. I think this should be the recommendation, but I just wasn't sure.
So just look at the process. At the last meeting, when the charge was given to the nominating committee, I asked if any board member was interested in one of those positions to please reach out to Reverend Tatum, and I think there was a time frame. There was
Okay.
I don't remember what it was, but a couple of weeks or something of that nature. So I'm just curious, are you suggesting that, let's say that same process is used, then before the chair would come back with the report, that something would go out to the board?
Yeah, I'm just thinking in the future, in terms of some window, right? Like, let's say you're imagining scenarios in which there are multiple candidates and you'd want to have time ahead of time. Again, I don't know how it works too, because if, for example, somebody else had other nominations like that they wanted to put forward day of, they didn't have that same sort of time frame. So I don't know if that's a requirement or if that's a standard practice thing. Okay, not a requirement. All right, I think the process works. That's cool with me.
Okay.
Madam Chair, if I could, though, as I said before, though, I believe that we are in the foundational stage. So therefore, if that's something that I believe that the board wants us to work on and come back with some recommendation on that, how we could possibly tweak that, I think that, Madam Chair, if you assign us to do that, I think that we can do that.
Consider it assigned.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. So the chair essentially will take the report from Reverend Tatum as a motion as to Janet Jackson going forward as chair, Brooke Burns as vice chair. Is there a second to that motion? Mr. Fluharty. Any other questions or concerns? Then all in favor, please raise your hands, and I will abstain. And Brooke will abstain. Thank you. It'll be a privilege and pleasure to serve you for another year.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I will have a structure for us to look at the next time that we meet.
And no, thank you. And this is helpful. And one thing I wanted to ask whether it's within the purview of the nominating committee, are we just talking about nominating people to become chair and vice chair, or are we also thinking about in consideration for potential future members of the board having any sort of?
That was brought up, I think, at the last meeting, and I think that we're going to have to work on how that rotation is going to, because we all can't rotate off at the same time.
Well, keep in mind that the way it was set up, some of us are only serving 2-year terms, unless you are reelected. I mean, and I don't recall the number, but I am a 2-year term person, and that was done specifically, so we didn't have a situation where, let's say, in 6 years, because you can serve 2 3-year terms, we would all be going off at the same time.
Yeah.
And again, and not knowing if there might be, we had a situation, we actually had 2 resignations, but what might, happen, with that.
Got it.
The agenda then says just open discussion, and I think in a way we've had a lot of open discussion, but I think it's always good to, if we can, to have that kind of just open time. Is there any other matter to come before the board? Any other topic? There is a topic that I discussed with a board member, Ms. Younger, and this could be just for our next meeting. And I'm looking at Mr. Tobias because it involves the city attorney's office, a little bit. And it's the various roles that people play. But I do think that from talking to Ms. Younger, a part of the, I won't say confusion, is that, were you looking at the city attorney's website?
I was.
Looking at the website for its accuracy, because I think maybe it still had you, Mr. Tobias, in the prosecutor's office. So I just mean, because again, and really, again, for the public, so that they understand that, you know, we have the general counsel, Ms. Baker Morris, we have Mr. Tobias, who has been assigned to us, and assignment to for the IG, so that they understand that there are kind of these, it is not an unusual, and I wouldn't call it a practice, it's just the way it is, that you have various individuals who work for the same person, the city attorney, but who can operate in very different roles, and that it doesn't create a conflict, because that really was the issue, I think, of the conversation. So a little tutorial on that just might be helpful, so that the members of the public can understand that, okay? All right. Anything else to come before the board? The chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So move second. Second. All in favor, please raise your hand. We are adjourned, and we will very quickly try to ascertain our meeting date in May, okay?
Yes, please do, because my May calendar will fill up quickly.
Yes. So Colleen will be doing that very quickly.
All right.